You woke up this morning with something already waiting for you. Not a sound, not a person, a feeling. A low hum at the back of your mind, a vague, nameless dread that had no address and no obvious reason to exist. And yet there it was. Again. You told yourself it would pass. It usually does. But by mid-morning it was still there. Quieter, maybe, but present, like a radio playing in another room. You distracted yourself. You checked your phone. You made coffee. You filled the hours with movement and noise because silence makes the feeling louder. And then you caught yourself worrying about why you were worrying, which somehow made it worse. Here's the thing no one tells you. That is not a malfunction. That is not a disorder. That is not you falling apart. That is your brain doing exactly what it was built to do, executing an ancient program with extraordinary precision, doing it so well that it does not know how to stop even when you need it to. Your brain is a prediction machine, not a thinking machine, not a feeling machine. A prediction machine that uses every experience you have ever had to construct a continuous model of what is about to happen next and what threats might be hidden inside it. Neuroscientist Carl Friston at University College London spent decades building a mathematical framework around this idea, what he calls the free energy principle, and the simplified version is this. Your brain's single most important job is to minimize surprise. Every moment of your waking life, your brain is comparing incoming information against what it expected. When reality matches the prediction, your brain barely notices. When something falls outside that prediction, an alarm fires. And worry is what happens when that alarm fires about the future. Think about that for a moment. The future has not happened yet. It cannot be perceived directly. It cannot be confirmed or denied. It is, by definition, uncertain territory. And uncertainty is the one thing a prediction machine cannot process cleanly. So your brain does the only logical thing it can. It generates threats, not real threats, simulated ones, worst-case versions of future events, rendered in enough detail to feel real, held in your mind long enough to plan around them. Because planning is the closest thing to certainty your brain knows how to create. You worry because worrying feels like doing something. This is the insight that psychologist Graham Davey at the University of Sussex spent years trying to articulate. His research found that chronic worriers are not people who think more negatively than others. They are people who believe, on some deep level, that worrying itself is useful, that if they stop, something bad will happen that they could have prevented. That worry is a form of preparation. That running worst-case scenarios is what a responsible mind does. Davey called this the metacognitive belief in the utility of worrying, and it is one of the most persistent and invisible features of the anxious mind. You do not worry because you are weak. You worry because somewhere beneath conscious thought, your brain believes that worrying is how you survive. Now go back, way back. Picture a human being standing in open grassland 100,000 years ago. No permanent shelter, no guaranteed food, no wall between you and whatever moved in the dark. In that world, your brain's prediction machine had a calibration problem with no good solution. The cost of missing a real threat was death. The cost of generating a false alarm was stress. Those are not equal outcomes, not even close. So evolution built in a bias, a thumb on the scale, a systematic tendency to overweight danger. This is what neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux at New York University called the asymmetry of fear learning. The brain's threat circuits, anchored in a small almond-shaped region called the amygdala, are wired to encode danger faster, more deeply, and more durably than they encode safety. One frightening experience can wire a fear response in minutes. Reversing that response through direct experience and deliberate effort can take months. Your ancestor who heard a rustle in the tall grass and assumed predator survived long enough to have children. Your ancestor, who assumed it was nothing and went back to eating, did not always get that luxury. So here you are, tens of thousands of years later, carrying a nervous system that was precision engineered for a world where the wrong assumption could end you in seconds. The grassland is gone. The nervous system is not. And now you are using that same ancient hardware to process a work email, a mortgage payment, a text message that went unanswered for 3 hours longer than you expected. A comment someone made in a meeting that you cannot stop hearing 4 days later at 2 in the morning. Your brain does not know the difference between a threat to your physical survival and a threat to your social standing. It cannot distinguish between a predator and a deadline. It runs the same alarm system for both. It releases the same cortisol, tightens the same muscles, narrows your attention to the same tunnel. You walk through a modern world, running ancient emergency software. And the cruelest part of this is that the harder you try to stop it, the worse it gets. Here's why. Your brain uses suppression as a tracking signal. When you tell yourself, do not think about that, your brain first has to retrieve the thing you are trying to avoid in order to monitor whether you are successfully avoiding it. Psychologist Daniel Wegner at Harvard demonstrated this in a series of experiments that became famous as the white bear studies. He told participants, whatever you do not think about a white bear. What happened? White bear, immediately, in every corner of awareness. The act of suppression creates the very intrusion it was designed to prevent, and the same mechanism applies to worry. The more mental energy you invest in pushing a thought out of your mind, the more insistently that thought returns. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is operating exactly as it was designed to. But designed for what, specifically? That is the question worth sitting with, because here's the part that changes things. Worry, in its original form, is not a disorder. It is a cognitive tool. It is your imagination being used by your brain to run threat simulations before the threat arrives so that you have time to prepare an actual response. The problem is not the simulation itself. The problem is that your brain has no mechanism for distinguishing between a solvable problem and an unsolvable one, between a threat you can act on and a threat that exists purely as possibility. So it runs the simulation either way, over and over. Not because it is confused, because it is being thorough. The ancestral brain had no concept of a problem with no action attached to it. In the world your nervous system was built for, there was always something you could do. Move to higher ground, store more food, check the perimeter. Every threat came with a potential response. Modern life has handed you an entirely new category of problem that evolution never equipped you to handle. The thing you cannot control, cannot predict, cannot prevent, and cannot outrun. Climate systems, economic forces, other people's choices, illness, the slow passage of time and what it takes from you. For those problems, your brain still generates the simulation, still fires the alarm, still waits for you to take action. And when you do nothing because there is nothing meaningful to be done, the alarm stays on. It loops, it waits. This is what chronic worry actually is, an action alarm with nowhere to direct itself. So what do you do with that? Not suppress it. The white bear research already showed you where that leads. Not argue yourself out of it with logic, because your brain is too sophisticated for that. It knows when you are telling it something that conflicts with what the simulation is generating, and it will keep running the simulation until the evidence actually changes. The researchers who have spent the most time studying this, including psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema at Yale, who dedicated 30 years to understanding why some minds get trapped in loops of rumination, found something consistent and reproducible. The most effective thing a worried mind can do is not outthink the worry. It is to give the alarm a resolution, not necessarily a solution to the problem itself. A resolution to the loop, a decision, a completed action, even a small one, even one that addresses only a narrow piece of what feels like an overwhelming whole. Because the alarm is not asking you to fix everything, it is asking you to finish something. Think about the worries that have actually faded in your life. They almost never faded because you reasoned them away. They faded because something happened. Someone responded. You made a decision and lived with it. The situation moved forward. The alarm found its off switch, not in a thought, but in a completed action. Something the brain could register as done and file away. This is the mechanism behind a discovery made by psychologists Roy Baumeister and E.J. Masicampo, who found in their research that simply writing down a concrete plan for an unfinished task, not completing the task itself, just writing down the plan, significantly reduced intrusive thoughts about it. Your brain does not need the task done. It needs to believe the task has been handed off to a reliable system. And when you write it down with enough specificity that your brain trusts the plan, something ancient and automatic inside you says, received, acknowledged. Alarm can lower now. You are not broken. Your brain is doing what all brains do. It is running the same protective system that kept your ancestors alive across countless generations of real and immediate danger in conditions you cannot fully imagine and would not survive. It is simply running that system in a world it was not built to process, generating alerts about threats that are real but untouchable, running simulations with no clean endings, holding the alarm open because the action it is waiting for has no obvious form. Here's what has genuinely changed. You now have something your ancestors never had. You have language for this. You have a model of what is happening inside you. You can observe the alarm firing and name it, not as a verdict on who you are, but as a description of a process that is happening to you. And that naming, that small moment of distance between you and the feeling, is the beginning of the loop loosening, not breaking, not disappearing. Loosening, which is how it actually works. You woke up this morning with something already waiting for you, and now you know what it is. Not anxiety for the sake of anxiety, not weakness, not evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with the way you are put together. It is your brain doing its oldest job, scanning for threats that have not arrived yet, running simulations at full effort, waiting for a completed action to tell it the situation is handled. The same system that kept your ancestors breathing in a dangerous world is still working on your behalf, right now, without a single day off in your entire life. The question has never been how to make it stop. The question is what to give it that it will actually accept as done.